Hello and welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. I'm Guillaume, your host, and each week I'm fortunate to share with you stories from climate tech founders, investors, and corporations sharing their unique insights into this fast-moving industry. Eventually, like me, you will learn, discover, and get inspired by those unique men and women who are contributing to the fight against climate change, and I hope it will help you to take a step in this formidable movement. So before we start, I just want to share a few words about us, as this podcast is just the tip of the iceberg of what we do at Startup Basecamp to support the climate tech movement. Our mission is to accelerate capital deployment towards climate tech founders, allowing them to focus on scaling their solutions. How do we do that? Every day, we help founders access to resources and connection and gain the visibility they need to expand their growth. We do this in a number of ways with a membership platform, a Slack group with a growing number of founders, investors, and experts from around the world. And recently, we went one step further with the matching services to connect founders with top climate tech investors. Keep in mind that we are able to do all of this thanks to the support of our listeners and our members. So please like and subscribe, share one episode with a friend, join a community, and if you haven't already done so, make a small donation to support our work. It really means the world to us. And now, enjoy the show! Hi everyone, in our latest episode, we engage in a thought-provoking conversation with Arnaud, CEO and co-founder of Hello Tomorrow, which accelerates radical solutions for human and planetary health by leveraging deep tech ventures. They've built a vast deep tech network helping startups and companies to develop innovative solutions. Services include innovation consulting, as well as organizing startup competition and acceleration programs. Arnaud, who holds a PhD in industrial economics and a master's in engineering, is driven by his expertise to bridge the gap between deep tech startups, investors, and industry giants to address global challenges. His transition from BCG to leading the charge in deep tech was driven by a desire to make a tangible impact on the world's environmental issues. Tune in to discover the intricacies of funding for innovative deep tech solutions aimed at combating climate change as we discuss the evolving challenges and opportunities in the sector and navigate the complex web of capital resources. Let's uncover together unique insights and challenges that deep tech startups encounter. Join us again, a more profound understanding of the deep tech world. In the second part of the show, Arnaud shares with us the importance of finding the right VC, especially for deep tech startups. He also sheds light into how resilience and grit are key pitching to different VCs. Arnaud, welcome to the show. Hi Arnaud, welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. I'm super happy to have you here with us today. It's been a long road to finally have each other on the show, so very excited about looking and hearing more about what you guys are doing with Hello Tomorrow, which is on a mission to accelerate the transfer of deep tech or deep technologies to solve some of the most pressing industrial, environmental, and societal challenges. So welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So that's the tradition on our show. We like to get a 30-second intro about the company, the fund. So can you give us a 30-second intro about Hello Tomorrow?
Yeah, sure. So we created Hello Tomorrow 12 years ago, indeed with this mission to use science and entrepreneurship to tackle some of the biggest challenges, starting with healthcare and sustainability in general, so climate definitely included. And today we are 40 people in Paris. I think we are the biggest deep tech network worldwide with more than 10,000 entrepreneurs, more than 800 VCs, and also a few thousand industry leaders. We organize big events like the Hello Tomorrow Summit to build and animate this community. We also have some newsletters and webinars and so on. We a bit more recently, 5 years ago, we also started a consulting activity to help governments and private companies understand the trends and launch new projects. And we also have startup programs. And last thing, I'm working on a VC fund. So it's not ready to deploy capital yet, but hopefully it should be early next year.
So much exciting news. So before we go deeper into Hello Tomorrow, I'd like to get a little bit, your insight about you, Arnaud. I mean, what are you passionate about? Like, what do you do besides supporting all of those deep tech founders and pushing forward Hello Tomorrow? I mean, as I always ask, like, who is Arnaud?
Well, that's it can be a very deep question. So I have two daughters. So that's kind of the two other babies that I had after Hello Tomorrow in terms of timing, but not in my heart, of course. I really like also to read like philosophy. I'm a big fan of. I play a lot of. I play some rugby. Unfortunately, it was a bit sad, like the we we just lost in the World Cup, but that's it. What else? And I think besides, I'm excited about technology, deep tech, science, and so on. But I think I'm even more interested in people, and that's also what I'm the proudest of with Hello Tomorrow. That's the team and the culture that we managed to build. So yeah, that's in the end, that's why I do it more than for the technology itself.
Thank you so much, Arnaud, for sharing all of that. So just to get a little bit of step back on your previous work-life experience prior to the launch of Hello Tomorrow, if you could reflect on maybe one or two pieces of experience that you had that in a way give you a hedge to launch Hello Tomorrow.
Yeah, sure. I think the most defining moment was when I was doing my PhD. So because I was in a research lab and I was surrounded by scientists creating crazy stuff, amazing technologies. But so I saw that there was a lot of potential to solve big problems and to create businesses. But most of that remained in academia. So I think that was the frustration also that led to the creation of Hello Tomorrow. With Xavier, who was doing his PhD at the same time. And before that, before this PhD, I did a master in engineering, so in food and agriculture, so life science, but more applied to food and agriculture than healthcare. And well, I think this is also an important part of why I'm passionate by science and technology. And also after that, so when actually at the very beginning of Hello Tomorrow, I was a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, and I think that was quite complementary to the PhD, where you really dig deep into one very specific topic. And BCG, I mean, management consulting, that's the total opposite. So you stay at a kind of shallow level, but you see many different businesses, sectors, and you learn a lot about business. So that was important both for creating a company, but also to look at deep tech with a more like also a business angle, not just a tech angle.
So if you could like maybe share with the audience a little bit about like often guests on the show and the one who has more like this sometimes deep tech approach or climate tech approach. What have like sometimes there's specific like aha moment where they said, you know what, instead of like just going a traditional like consulting career or working for like a financial asset manager, why I don't move into this more like clean climate tech in itself. And I know you guys don't do only climate tech, but it's something that is like growing into into your scope. So what is it eventually like your aha moment that you could share with the audience there?
Well, to be honest, I mean, maybe it would be good for the for the storytelling, but I never had a real like aha moment. It's more of always. I mean, I think I'm lucky enough to have a job that I find intellectually stimulating, and also I know that every day that I spend doing my job, it's making the world, a bit better, even if it's not directly with all the people we help. So I think that more it started as a non-profit organization actually. So yeah, I think from the very beginning, and that's in the DNA of Lotumo, that's changing the world with science basically. And yes, as you said, I mean climate tech, it's a big part of it. And actually, deep tech, it's kind of climate tech also by design. I looked at we just closed a big competition. So we had more than 4,000 startups that applied from all over the world. And we did the first selection, and out of the 1,600 that made to the first round, 45% of them addressed the SDG 13th, so climate action. So a lot of deep tech startups are actually addressing climate change, and I think it's true also the other way around, because I think a lot of the climate tech startups are actually deep tech, because CO2 we can do with pure digital. As someone CO2 away, you actually need to really dig into the physical world and build solutions that energy and so on, and that's what deep tech is about.
Yeah, definitely. So let's take a zoom out and a step back at the macro landscape. And prior to this recording, we discussed together, and I think like would like to look a little bit more about the state of deep tech European early stage investment landscape today in the private sector. I mean, the challenge and an opportunity to contribute in a way. Again, we are on the Tech for Climate podcast here, so we have this more lens on the fight against climate change in itself. So maybe you can start by giving the audience your. At first, I would say let's start by a simple definition of like what is deep tech, because deep tech sometimes for people can be a little bit confusing, and then let's go into more the investment part of it. So let's start with the deep tech definition that you would give.
Yes, I think I always give a different one. I should learn one by heart, but basically that's we would consider as deep tech all the startup that build a product or a service that is based on a significant scientific or engineering advances. And it means that they are different than traditional tech startups, because I think after 2 decades of pure digital, tech has been associated with e-commerce, like software as a B2B SaaS and so on. And compared to the startups, I think deep tech, since they have a lot of R&D, especially at the beginning, they take more time to reach the market. They have also a different risk profile, because there is it's mostly technology risk. Quite often, you have actually less market risk, because they're addressing some already existing markets, but just replacing the way energy or materials are produced, for example. And then there is also less competition risk, because um, you have the technology edge and the IP that is a very efficient barrier to entry. While for traditional startups, you need to fight against competition by injecting lots of capital to fuel the growth and to leverage the scale effect and the network effect. So it's a different type of risk. And as a consequence, also a different way to finance them, a different ecosystem that we need to build. And that's why we are creating a specific ecosystem for deep tech.
So now that we understand a bit better what fall under the umbrella of deep tech, let's double click on the deep tech investment landscape, as we said. So if you could share with the audience some data points in terms of like sectors and subsectors and maybe the amount of capital that it represents as of today. I mean, who is taking the biggest share of the capital, and at which stage, and maybe why?
Yeah. So I did my homework. So I looked at the figures. So basically, there are two sources. One is kind of looking at D-Room or CTVC or other data points about generally the amount of capital invested in deep tech and climate tech. And the other one, it's looking at the number of startups that just apply to our competition, which gives a bit more like forward-looking view because it's startups just created now. So the first, I only looked at the one that addressed the SDG 13, so making sure that it's really the intersection of deep tech and climate tech. So that being said, the first sector with a broad definition is it's energy. So broad definition because in energy I include batteries that sometimes are in mobility or energy efficiency that sometimes is in building. But with this broad definition, there is currently around 10 billion euros a year that is invested in energy startups. And the biggest part is in battery. That's I think the subsector that is attracting the most investment. Also, nuclear is it's attracting quite a lot of money, and especially recently, it's been increasing quite a lot over the last years. Then there is renewable energy also. It's a bit older. And what's interesting also is to see that there is a very different ratio of capital invested and number of startups, meaning that in batteries and nuclear, you have a ratio approximately of, I mean, it's based on the startups that we see, so it's not the exact numbers, but you can compare them. It's something like 100 million per startup. And again, there are way more startups than the one we screen. But let's say, okay, it can be 10 times less, but that's still 100 million. And for renewables, it's only 5, meaning that there are way more startups in renewable energy compared to the capital available than in nuclear or batteries. So I think that's an interesting information. And when you look at investing in a renewable energy startup, it means that there is a lot of other startups doing the same thing, a lot of competition. So the selection must be way more drastic. And then when, I mean, I won't go into too many details, but I think the other important subsectors are energy storage, grid management, hydrogen, and energy efficiency. So again, transportation, I took batteries out. I put that in energy transition. So there is not much left in this. Also, sustainable aviation fuel are also in energy. So there is not much left in deep tech for transportation. But so then the second sector would be food and agriculture. And it's also more dynamic, so it's increasing a lot. And the total funding, it's something more around 5 billion. So it's still half of that of energy, but yes, growing quite fast with many things around. Yeah, it's can be different way to bring fertilizers or crop use, land use. Well, there are many subsectors, but and also food processing. So not just agriculture, but also food processing, supply chain, packaging, and so on. Then there is construction. So construction, it's around 1 billion a year, and that's increasing faster than food and agriculture. That's and it's mostly around materials. I think materials represent about 50% of the number of startups and the investment in the construction sector. And And yes, there is also manufacturing that's is actually a bit more than construction. Sorry, but it's everything related to materials like plastics, metals, so all the materials used for manufacturing, and also all the industry 4.0 and kind of new processes and manufacturing equipment. And in terms of what is manufactured, actually the very important part is related to textile and fashion in general. And this is also increasing a lot. And then a lot around automotive, aerospace, and also paper production. So so that's it for the kind of big big sectors and subsectors. And again, it's looking not just at what is happening today, but really the evolution. The one that are increasing the most, it's manufacturing, with plus the number of startups that we saw applying to our competition. It's increased by 60% in 4 years. So that's huge. And then there is construction, with an increase of 44%, and food and agriculture with an increase of 22%, while energy, which is the biggest, is actually a bit more stable.
Mhm. Okay, but thank you so much for sharing this, I would say, holistic overview and having those data points. I think is very interesting, and you don't find that everywhere. You need to do your homework, as you said. But thank you for and especially relating to what you see with these large samples of more than 4,000 companies that you guys got in the application process. So to get a deeper understanding of the ecosystem, maybe and understanding this increase of capital and influx in the different sectors. I mean, according to you, what are the different type of source of capital you have identified? I mean, where are they coming from? Who are the main backers of those early stage deep tech companies? And in a way, how is the current capital market around those deep tech companies organized?
So it's very different for each stage. And if you look at what is done really at the research phase, so when it comes to really proving in a research lab that it works in experimental conditions, so more like backing the science risk, here there is no private investors. It's mostly exclusively research grants. You start to have some VCs like SOSV, for example, that also create some research grants, because that's getting even earlier access to potential startups. But I think that's very limited. So it's mostly public grants, public research grants. Then if you look at what is happening just after, when the startups get out of the lab and they start to build their prototype, and basically um, it is about financing the technology risk, so proving that it works in real conditions. Here it's a mix of still many grants, not necessarily research grants, but like the SBIR in the US or the equivalents in Europe, and also investors. But at the pre-seed stage, in terms of investors, you will see mostly business angels and kind of small, small regional funds, highly linked to universities, to local universities, and yeah, not so many like big funds that maybe have too much asset under management and cannot really focus on very small checks because they have a lot of capital to deploy. And then if you look at the phase of kind of not still at the factory level, but yeah, it's already proven that it works in real conditions. So it's starting to the first pilot phase. It's kind of not yet scaling up. Let's say Series A, seed Series A, then you have many bigger VCs. I think that's where you have the most money. And here it's mostly private investors. There is not much grants anymore, so it's I mean, yeah, it's a lot of it's mostly equity. And then I think when it starts to be quite different from traditional tech startups, it's to finance the scaling up phase. So to finance especially the first pilot factories or the first factories. And here it's usually a mix of grants, equity financing, but also non-equity financing like debt. And that's a bit challenging for deep tech companies and also climate tech companies, I guess, to manage to find the right capital stack to finance this phase. And then when it's like just building new factories, but there is no risk anymore because it's been proven already with the first one, then usual infrastructure, usual debt, and banks are happy to finance this kind of project.
They always come at the end. No, I'm kidding, but that's true. And I was speaking with on the European Union side as well that there is really this gap at the BC, especially in this current market, where if the companies is not fast enough for the return on the traditional VC fund and the timeline that they have, there is sometimes like this valley of debt that companies who have been working hard on a very interesting project that can have a huge potential still is facing, and where it might be interesting to have also grants and public money to support that chasm that needs to be crossed. So in this current market uncertainty, I mean, there's still high inflation rates, interest rates are still way higher than before. Money is not cheap anymore, as people were claiming it was in the past. Do you see any trends, in emerging in this early stage financing for deep tech solutions?
Well, from what I'm seeing, there is. I think that's one of the sectors that is the least impacted, deep tech and climate tech, and the intersection of both. Actually, I look at a report from D-Room, and it's actually increasing the investment in this sector. I think that's because it's driven by long-term drivers like climate change. Unfortunately it's not going to stop anytime soon, and there is more and more also public money backing climate tech and deep tech. So I'm not saying it's easy. It's never easy to build a company and grow it and raise money, but I didn't see in the last month or 2 years like a big impact of higher interest rates and so on.
Okay, so now that we get a better understanding of this overall context, maybe let's get a little bit your opinion on this, I would say, like low-hanging fruits and long-term financing alternative and opportunities. I mean, do you see like existing alternative to traditional backers that could help to accelerate the movement of and development of deep tech startups?
I would say probably companies, corporations, either directly or through their CVC. A lot of them are looking at accelerating their own decarbonization roadmap. So they are looking at investing in startups. So that can be, and since they have a strategic interest, they are not so afraid of like long return on investment. So and there can also be a potential acceleration for the go-to-market and help de-risking the industrialization phase. On the other hand, they can also be. It's important to understand what really is their interest, because usually it's not purely financial interest like traditional investors. They also have strategic interests. So It's important to make sure that there is no, like exclusivity related to the investment, or that they don't have too much power to influence the roadmap to create a product that is fitting their needs and maybe not exactly the best market. So yes, it can be tricky, but it's I think it's a good alternative to, let's say, more traditional investors. And I was thinking also of family offices, because usually that's not the first type of investors one will have in mind. But there are many family offices that invest also directly into startups, and they have different drivers than traditional VCs, because traditional VCs, they need to exit in a few years, like between 6 and 10 years, let's say. While family offices, they can stay in the capital for longer, and also depending on the families, they can have also a mandate that is not just the return on investment, but also the legacy that the family wants to leave, because it's their personal money. So they might be also more willing to valorize climate tech, deep tech, and climate tech than some traditional VCs.
So to close this section, I mean, according to you, what are the major, constraint or roadblock you have seen today to accelerate, I would say, the financing of the deep tech companies in itself? I mean, is it like, do we need new policies to push that at the European level? Is it maybe a lack of education on the investors' side as well? That deep tech is not a SaaS, model, and that return can be also very interesting. I mean, what do you see as being at the forefront? What could be improved, or what is slowing down this movement?
Well, many things, but if we start from the pure investment part, I see two gaps in the investment value chain. The first one being at the very early stage. So as I was saying, when a startup is spinning out of research, usually it's business angels and again these funds that are really related to one or two universities. But there is not many like big international funds that cover the, let's say, the pre-seed stage in deep tech, climate tech. And that's why actually we are raising our own fund, because we want to fill this gap. So good startups, they will always fund money, but sometimes they have in their cap table like many business angels, like funds related to universities that have some also political interest. And so yes, I think there is room for let's say more efficient and professional investors at this stage. And then the other gap is more, as you were saying, Series B, C to finance the scaling up, the industrialization phase, and the first factories. And here, I know that there are some. I mean, all the governments are working on it. I think that's a top priority for them. And for example, a few days ago in France, they announced the release of. They announced that they selected 10 companies that they will support to finance their first factories. And I think another good way to make to solve this problem at this stage is to just change a little bit make it more attractive for existing investors to finance this stage. And that's I think what they are doing in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the tax credits that they create for startups, that like investment tax credits. So it might be even a better way, like to just change a little bit the rules of the game and let private investors pick the winners. And maybe we could see more of that in Europe as well. And then there is many things that could be fixed. But yes, maybe we don't have time to go into details, but I think around talents, because deep tech startups, need very specific and rare talents. So they need to be able to tap into a global talent pool. And as a CEO today, I know how hard it is to hire a foreigner, and that shouldn't. I mean, I think that's a big issue. Another problem that we see is the collaboration between startups and big companies, because especially in deep tech and climate tech, um, usually it's B2B. Usually they need to fit in existing value chains, so they need to they need to work with big companies, and maybe it's been improving over the last 10 years, but I think there is still lots of room for improvement. And we always see the same cycle where they start to try the bad standard models. Eventually, they figure out something that works for them, and then the key people leave, and then they start again a new cycle. So yes, I mean, no easy answer here, because you cannot decide top down. I think it's just slowly improving with more and more people learning. Um, and yes, I would say that's the yeah. I mean, there are many more, but I guess that's the main issues that I have on my mind now.
Any question I should have asked you that I didn't for this part, or that you would like to add?
Um, no, no. I mean, maybe I can invite everybody listening to join us at our next event in March 24, so 21st and 22nd in Paris. So yes, that's I'm using that as an opportunity to invite everybody to join us.
But that's fantastic, and I think everybody will come, or at least I will be there, because I didn't have the chance to come before. So let's go maybe before that, like into the specific of Hello Tomorrow. I mean, can you maybe tell us a little bit about like and you already started to uncover that, but like the story, the genesis of it. I mean, what was the initial gap that you saw and you said, okay, this is like the reason why I'm doing it? Like help us to understand a bit like the initial story behind that.
So after my master in in engineering, I did a PhD. So I was in academia, and I mean, it was a good experience, but obviously it was a bit frustrating to see that it was kind of a close place where basically, if we want to have a good career when you're a researcher, you just need to go into the best conferences, academic conferences, and you need to publish your papers in the best journals, and that's it. Um, and we could clearly see that there was a lot of potential from the scientific discoveries to solve some of the big problems that we're facing. Again, starting with healthcare and climate change. So that was the starting point, and at that time, it was also the boom of the startup in Europe, and especially in France. There were the first co-working space, the first kind of accelerators. So I think it was quite obvious that entrepreneurship and startups could be a good way to bring science out of the lab and in the market, because the traditional tech transfer with big companies doing some R&D research with research centers was a little bit broken, or at least it was working for their core business, so to improve their current core business. But to do something radically different and disruptive, it was not working. So that's where I think startups can really be more efficient, because they can take more risks backed by VCs. They can be way faster. They are not biased by any legacy or existing business model and business units. So yes, that I think that's and then we looked at also what was going on in the US, And Xavier, so the other co-founder of Hello Tomorrow, he was doing his PhD between Paris and the MIT. So we looked at what they were doing, and the first startup competition that we did was actually very similar to what the MIT was doing. Basically, giving 100,000 euros, not dollars, but 100,000 prize to the best startups. So we did that in Europe. And the first year in 2013, so 10 years ago, we got 1,500 startups. From science that applied to the competition. Um, so it proved that there were many scientists willing to actually um, take on the journey of creating a company and bringing their research to the market and have a real impact. So it proved that there was lots of potential, and that's how it started. Then we organized the first event to create also a community for those people, because I think that's the first thing they told us. All those science entrepreneurs that we call deep tech entrepreneurs now, they told us, like, yes, finally we have a tribe, we have our own community, because when they were going to startup events with many, like digital startups, they were not feeling that they belong to the same family, and I think that's what we created for them, like maybe not a family but a community.
So you mentioned family, community, you mentioned the competition, you mentioned now that this upcoming capital allocation vehicles that you guys are putting in place. So maybe if you could help us to understand, as you really are on day to day with those founders and scientists. I mean, what are the initial challenges that you see that are very specific to deep tech climate tech or deep tech climate tech founders versus traditional tech founders in itself, and how do you at Hello Tomorrow try to solve those or support those founders related to those challenges?
Well, I think the challenges are connected to the fact that it's highly R&D intensive. So we actually did some analysis based on the thousands of applications we had to the competition, and we published a first report that's called From Tech to Deep Tech in 2017. So I don't remember exactly all the figures, but let's say that I think the first challenge, it's the capital intensity, and especially in the first 5 years, deep tech is actually more capital intensive than traditional tech, because it's not like you can ship a first product from your garage with a few laptops and so on. Usually you need to access some lab equipment, some pretty expensive stuff, and it takes time as well. So, but the good news is that after those 5 years, we also did this analysis that we published in 2021. We showed that actually it's less capital intensive, more for the growth phase, except when you have big factories. But otherwise, you have a competitive advantage, so you don't need to burn lots of cash to actually grow faster than your competitors, because you can become profitable. Basically, you go from a startup to a kind of SME, like a small enterprise, but that can be profitable once you can ship some products. So yes, the capital intensity at the very beginning, in the first years, that's the biggest challenge, according to the entrepreneurs themselves, because we asked them. The second one was the time to market. And yes, because it takes time with the R&D, so it's kind of connected to the first one, actually. Then there is the technology risk, and because again at the beginning, usually the deep tech startups, they have a technology that they know what market it can address, but it's been proven to work only in the lab, in the experimental conditions, and you don't know actually if it will work in real conditions for like a real client in the field or in the factory or whatever. So that's an additional risk that after 2 decades of digital e-commerce, B2B SaaS, most VCs were not used to take anymore, especially in Europe. I think that's what VC come from initially, like backing this kind of risk. But I think they got a bit lazy, and and today they're not used to that anymore. Um, so especially 10 years ago, it was really challenging for deep tech startup to raise money because VCs would see like, well, it's not even working in real conditions. Like, go do some R&D and then come back to see me when it's working. So obviously today it's not like that anymore. But yeah, that's still a big challenge. Um, and yeah, then maybe also the talents, because I think compared to traditional tech, it's a bit more recent. So you don't have that many experienced founders that are like repeat founders that are building their second or third deep tech company. Um, you still have many, like scientists building their first companies, trying their CEO role for the first time. So that's also a bit tricky. And yes, and also to recruit some talents. If you create a tech startup, let's say for the technology part, you can easily recruit some developers. There are thousands. I mean, yeah, it's almost a commodity. While in deep tech, you need very specific skills, so it's much harder to find. So yes, that's I think that's the main challenges that those startups are facing that are different from traditional tech startups. But again, the upside is that once you, with the IP, with the technology, you have a very good barrier to entry. Usually, you target a market like, I don't know, if you produce energy, uh, people will buy it. I mean, there is no market risk. It just need to be cheap enough to compete with what is in the market. But and yes, I think there is the reward also of doing something that actually matters. And I think all of that more than compensates the addition, the challenges and the and the difficulties, and that's why it's actually the fastest growing asset class in VC. So now I think everybody cares, big companies, governments, and investors.
So you mentioned that you just closed the application for your competition, selected already out of those 4,000 applicants, 1,600, if I remember well the figures. Looking at that and looking at like the portfolio or companies that you have in your network as of today, not as direct investment, but more in your network in general. Which sectors, according to you, is like the most promising or exciting today? Where do you see any trends in any subcategories of the deep tech environment? I mean, you mentioned all the capital allocation in energy, in transportation, and stuff like that. But what's coming? What is like? Help us to understand a little bit like the new trends here.
So before I was talking more about the intersection between deep tech and climate tech, but that's if you look at deep tech in general, that's
Mm-hmm.
quite similar. So I think I mean, energy is big, but it's been out there for a while, for a long time. So of course it's very important, but that's not maybe as exciting as I would say manufacturing. So whether it is manufacturing cars or textile like clothes or paper, or in general like new materials and manufacturing processes, it's really increasing a lot, and it's really addressing deep challenges around sustainability and climate change. Um, then there is construction. So like carbon neutral cement, for example, or materials in general. There is food and agriculture. That's personally, I have a background also in agronomy, so I'm happy to kind of go back to my roots here. It's also growing really a lot, and it can have a big impact also on climate change. And then maybe more in terms of technologies. Um, I think nowadays everybody will tell you that they're excited in AI and generative AI. I mean, I would agree. I find that really exciting, but maybe not for the same applications. So what's in AI, what I'm most interested in is how AI can actually accelerate other technologies, starting with the discovery of new chemicals, new molecules. If you think about chemistry, it can be also, if you're interested in healthcare, how it can accelerate the discovery of new drugs, because basically it allows to go from kind of random, trial and errors to designing the molecule using AI, and then using also AI to analyze lab data faster. Well, I won't go into too much details, but yes, I'm quite excited by that. And I think also in general by synthetic biology. I think there is a challenge. I mean, basically that's to use living organisms like cells or parts of the cells to as kind of factories to build new things. Can be fabrics. It can be cosmetics. It can be well, many things. There is a challenge to scale because it's not hard to go from the lab to huge quantities using synthetic biology and precision fermentation and so on. And the challenge of reaching the right cost at scale. But it started in healthcare, where there is no really limit to what we are willing to pay to get a new drug or a new treatment. Then in some kind of niche markets, maybe in some cosmetics and so on, it starts to be cost competitive. And if the learning curve continues, it's also expected to be competitive in much more like commodity mass markets like food, maybe energy production. So I find that also quite exciting. And well, I mean, I could go on, so maybe you need to stop me. But I think also in semiconductors and the kind of advanced computing in general. So everybody is talking about quantum computing, of course. But I think also there are a lot of companies working on kind of current semiconductors, but to improve them. For example, the winner of the startup competition that we run in Japan. So we had a Japanese final. They are working on semiconductors based on topographic materials that could reduce the energy consumptions of semiconductors, and that's also a big issue. So I think there are a lot of exciting innovations also in this field.
Thank you so much for unveiling all of that and sharing that with the audience. So, what's next for Hello Tomorrow?
Well, as I was saying, I'm working on this fund. So what we want to do is invest in the best very early stage companies. So mostly pre-seed, alongside VCs from our network, because basically we see a good part of the deal flow at this very early stage. We also have a very good network of VCs in deep tech that can lead rounds in pretty much any domain. So we want to match those and co-invest with the VCs. So that's the plan, and I'm particularly excited about this very early stage because I think that it's still underlooked by most VCs. And I think if you are very good at underwriting technology risk, so if you are very good at understanding it and doing the technology due diligence, you can do an arbitrage between the kind of high perceived risk and what you are actually able to understand, and therefore create a very profitable VC business focusing on this investment thesis, and also filling a gap and then helping the start of the company. So yes, I'm quite excited about this new step. And some quite experienced investor joined the team 1 month ago. So I'm working with him to prepare the fundraising. So hopefully we have some good news to share next year. And yes, I think that's that's the big new project that we have. And otherwise, again, next year we have our big event in Paris in March 2024, between March 20th and 22nd. That's the biggest, the two biggest news I would share.
So what's your personal point of view on the climate crisis? As I always ask during the show to our guests here, I mean, what would you say to people who feel demoralized by all the already visible consequences of climate change? I mean, are we doomed?
Well, to be honest, I'm really an optimistic. Sometimes maybe too much, because we need to face the issues. Um, so I think it helps also when you're a CEO and you face lots of, of issues all the time. But yeah, concerning climate change, I mean, of course, it's very scary, but I'm still quite confident that we'll manage to find some solutions, but also I hope to unite as a species, maybe, to face this challenge. And some things that cannot be done when there is no crisis become possible when everything falls apart. So I hope that we will find the inspiration and the strength to actually rise up to the challenge and come up with new, maybe, global governance models, new way of financing those solutions that wouldn't be possible if there was no crisis. So that's kind of what I hold on to to stay positive. But well, it's not. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that's not a that's not a big problem. That's a big problem. That I'm more focusing on the trying to find solutions, and I'm naturally optimistic, so I'm not focusing too much on the negative thoughts. But it's it's not an easy thing, and it depends on each person. So I don't know if if this is a good piece of advice for other people.
But it's definitely your point of view, and I think I have the chance to interview a lot of people who have this optimistic and in the action point of view. And I think the crisis is there. We know it. How can we, find solution? I think that's, according to me, the best way to move forward. That's for sure. So, how can the community of listeners, experts, investors, founders listening to the show can help you today?
Well, they can help by joining our community, so they can, even if for the entrepreneurs, even if the competition is closed, they can, there is always a way to join and become part of the what we call the deep tech pioneers community. So that's the startup that we select every year, and they can also apply when the competition is closed. And it's kind of helping us because the bigger our network, the stronger we are all together. So yes, that's that's helping. Um, And then I think for investors also, joining our community makes us stronger and able to invest together in more startups. So yes, joining our community and then in a more pragmatic way, we are always looking for new partners, sponsors for the events. Also happy to work on all those domains like energy, food, agriculture, new materials, manufacturing, to work with big corporations that might need some help to understand what's out there, and especially in this kind of hard to grasp deep tech ecosystem. So I think joining our events, because the more we are, the stronger we are.
Any question I should have asked you and I didn't for this first part of the show?
No, nothing that comes to my mind.
Thank you so much, Arnaud, for your time, for everything that you do for the deep tech ecosystem. I think Hello Tomorrow is a fantastic adventure. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I can't wait to join you guys in March at the conference, and I encourage everybody to join as well.
Okay, thank you, and have a good day, and see you in March then.
Thanks again for joining us on the Tech for Climate podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned next week for more climate tech insights. In the meantime, head on over to our webpage at startupbasecamp.org, where we have lots more insights and resources for anyone wanting to get involved in climate tech. If you find our resources useful, please consider donating to support our small self-funded team. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends, and see you next time.